Do you know the mind can be your greatest friend or your cruelest enemy? It's said that a single thought can lead you down a path of destruction or elevate you to enlightenment. But here's the shocking truth. The more you try to push away certain thoughts, the more they come back stronger, like a wildfire spreading with every gust of wind. Have you ever wondered why? Why does the mind seem so uncontrollable? And is there a way to stop the endless cycle of lust and dirty thoughts that cloud your clarity and peace? Let me tell you a story, one that holds the answer. A young boy, troubled by his restless mind, once approached me by the temple gates. He was just 14, but already carrying the burdens of inner conflict. His eyes revealed his torment before he even spoke. "Master, how can I stop these thoughts? They creep in when I'm alone. They make me ashamed, guilty, and helpless. I feel like I'm losing control." The pain in his voice was unmistakable, and it was the same pain I saw in myself many years ago. He wasn't just asking how to stop dirty thoughts, he was asking how to take back control of his life. I looked at him and said, "Before you can stop anything, you must first understand what it is." I reached for a clay bowl and placed it under the temple's waterfall. "This bowl is your mind," I told him, "and the waterfall is the world. Thoughts pour in constantly. Some are clean and clear like fresh water. Others are muddy and dark. We don't choose which thoughts flow, but we do choose how long we hold on to them." "What happens if I stop the bowl from filling?" he asked, curious. "Try it," I said. He cupped his hands under the waterfall, attempting to block the flow. Within moments, the water overflowed. No matter how hard he tried, it spilled everywhere. "The harder you try to block the flow," I explained, "the more chaotic it becomes. The key isn't to stop the water, but to empty the bowl before it overflows, to let go of what doesn't serve you. This is the first truth about controlling impure thoughts. Suppression doesn't work. Denying or resisting them makes them stronger. The more you tell yourself, 'Don't think about it,' the more it will dominate your mind." "Master," the boy asked, "but how do I empty the bowl? The thoughts keep returning." I led him to a still pond nearby. "Tell me, what do you see in the water?" "My reflection." "Now place your hand in the water." As he did, his reflection distorted. "This is the nature of desire," I said. "When you allow your desires and lust to take control, the mind becomes muddy, unclear. But here's a secret. Desire only controls you if you see it as you. But it's not you. It's just a reflection." The boy's eyes widened. "Then I just have to stop identifying with the thoughts?" "Exactly. Observe the thought, but don't become it. Instead of saying, 'I am lustful,' say, 'There is lust passing through my mind.'" "But there is one more lesson," I told him. I reached into the forest and picked up a handful of dirt. I sprinkled it into the pond. The water, now disturbed, became cloudy. When your mind is disturbed by negative thoughts, it's because there's something inside feeding them. Usually it's unresolved desires, guilt, or past experiences. The solution is not just to observe, but also to purify. Clear the mind by filling it with compassion, wisdom, and mindfulness. Only then will the muddy waters settle. "How do I do that?" he asked. I smiled. "Through mindfulness practices. Every time a thought arises, don't run from it. Acknowledge it. Accept it without judgment. Then redirect your mind toward compassion. Focus on gratitude. Focus on the people you love. Replace one thought with a higher one." The boy nodded slowly, as if understanding something deep within himself. "The mind will always have its moments of chaos, but every thought is like a passing cloud. It doesn't define the sky itself. Your job is to become the observer of the clouds, not their prisoner. And when you do this, peace becomes your natural state." I share this story because we all struggle. But you're not powerless, you have the strength to take control. Will you be the observer or the prisoner? The choice is yours. The boy nodded, but I could see there was still a shadow of doubt in his eyes. He understood the idea of observing thoughts, but there was one more barrier: the fear of feeling powerless when the mind was at its darkest. So, I decided to tell him another story. This one is from my own life, long before I became a monk. When I was younger, I was filled with pride and ambition. I wanted to prove my worth to everyone. But what I didn't realize was that beneath my ambition lay a constant undercurrent of restless desires. These desires were not just for material things, but also for power, validation, and control over others. One day I met a woman who was radiant and captivating. Her beauty and charm stirred something in me. I couldn't stop thinking about her. Day and night I was consumed by thoughts of her. It wasn't love. It was attachment born out of lust and insecurity. I began losing sleep, obsessing over what I could do to win her approval. But despite my best efforts, she remained distant. And every time she did, the storm in my mind intensified. Eventually, I couldn't take it anymore. I decided to visit my teacher, hoping he could give me a solution to stop these thoughts. My teacher welcomed me with a calm smile, but I was too agitated to notice. "Master, how can I stop thinking about her? I try to push the thoughts away, but they come back even stronger. They haunt me at every moment," I blurted out. He listened carefully, then handed me a large jar filled with muddy water. He asked me to hold it steady. I did, but the more I held it, the heavier it felt. The mud swirled around inside, making the water murkier with each second. "What does this feel like?" he asked. "Heavy and painful," I answered. "And why do you hold on to it?" I was confused. "Because you told me to," I said. "Exactly," he said with a knowing smile. "You hold on to painful thoughts because you think you have no choice. But you always have a choice. If you want clarity, you don't fight the mud. You simply let the jar rest, set it down. The mud will settle on its own." I placed the jar on the ground. Sure enough, after a few moments, the mud began to settle, and the water became clearer. "What does this mean?" I asked him. "Lust, like all thoughts, thrives on resistance. The more you fight it, the more it stirs the mud inside your mind. But when you allow the thought to exist without feeding it with obsession or shame, it loses its power. Let it be. Watch it settle. And then, you'll see the thought for what it is, temporary, fleeting, like a passing storm." I went back and reflected on those words. Every time I felt consumed by desire, I paused. I let the thoughts be. I observed them without judgment. And slowly the storm began to lose its strength. This is the second great truth about controlling lustful thoughts. You don't need to be a warrior fighting every storm in your mind. You need to be the calm observer who lets the storm pass. When you stop feeding the thought with shame or obsession, it no longer has power over you. And the best way to do this is to redirect your attention to something higher: kindness, gratitude, creativity, or love for the people around you. Every time you fill your mind with light, the darkness fades naturally. I looked at the boy and told him, "Remember, the mud in the jar will always try to rise, but you have the power to let it settle. And when it does, your mind will become as clear as still water." He left that day with a new sense of peace. And I leave you with this. The path to controlling your mind is not about suppression. It's about awareness, acceptance, and redirection. Suppose you feel trapped by thoughts today. Pause. Don't fight. Observe. Let it settle. You're stronger than you realize. The boy, though calmer, still seemed deep in thought. He said, "I understand how observing and letting go of thoughts can help. But what if the thoughts don't stop coming back? What if they're too persistent?" This was an important question. It reminded me of another young seeker I once met, a man filled with potential, but tormented by thoughts he could not escape. This man came to me one stormy night, drenched by rain and burdened by his own mind. His face was weary and his eyes were filled with desperation. "I've tried everything to control my thoughts, but they keep returning. It feels like I'm a prisoner in my own mind," he confessed. I welcomed him into my small hut and offered him a seat by the fire. As he dried himself, I asked him a simple question. Imagine you're hosting a dinner and an uninvited guest barges in. What would you do? "I'd ask them to leave," he said. "And if they refuse?" I asked. He thought for a moment. "I'd probably try to force them out." "And what if they were stronger than you?" I continued. His brow furrowed. "I suppose I'd feel helpless," he said. I smiled. "Now imagine you took a different approach. Instead of trying to force the guest out, you calmly acknowledged their presence. You said to them, You may sit here, but you have no power over me. I will not serve you food, nor will I entertain you. What would happen then? He hesitated and said, they would probably get bored and leave on their own. Exactly, I said. I explained to him that the mind works the same way. Unwanted thoughts are like uninvited guests. The more we resist or try to force them out, the more they dig in. But when we acknowledge their presence without giving them energy or attention, they begin to lose their hold over us. But how do I stop feeding these thoughts? He asked. By shifting your focus to something higher. Every time a thought arises, choose a positive action. Meditate, help someone in need, or engage in something creative. Over time, the uninvited guests will stop visiting because they know they won't be entertained. The young man left that night with renewed determination. A few months later, he returned. His face was radiant, and his eyes were filled with peace. I did what you said, he told me. Every time a thought came, I acknowledged it, but I refused to feed it. And when I chose kindness or creativity instead, my mind began to change. The uninvited guests don't visit me as often anymore. After sharing this story with the boy, I told him, your mind will always have uninvited guests, but you don't have to serve them, you don't have to fight them either. Acknowledge them, but choose something higher. Choose gratitude, love, or creativity. Over time, the storm will settle, and peace will become your natural state. He nodded, and for the first time I saw true clarity in his eyes. He realized that freedom from unwanted thoughts isn't about fighting. It's about transforming the way we respond. My dear friends, we all have uninvited guests in our minds, thoughts of lust, anger, or doubt. They will come, but when they do, remember this. You have the power to choose your response. Observe without judgment. Let the storm settle and redirect your energy to something higher. Every day is a new opportunity to transform your mind. Today, I challenge you. When unwanted thoughts come, don't resist them. Simply acknowledge their presence and choose an action that uplifts your spirit. You are stronger than your thoughts. You are the calm observer, the still water beneath the storm. Trust in your inner peace, and you will find the freedom you seek.